Welcome to Leadership Unfiltered, the podcast where real leaders get real about what it takes to succeed in today's fast-paced corporate world. I'm Dr. Dayan Douse, founder and president of P.R.I.D.E Consulting, a human behavior and development company serving as an executive coach and facilitator, working with organizations to deliver practical ways to evolve teams, advance organizations, and transform cultures. I hold a PhD in organization and management with over 2 decades of leadership experience in Fortune 500 companies. And I'm best-selling co-author of the book, Nothing But Net. I'm joined by my co-host, Phillip Smith. Phillip is a seasoned technology executive with extensive experience leading large-scale engineering teams and driving digital transformation. Over his 25 years of leadership experience, he has held multiple roles from supervisor to vice president. His personal brand is coder by blood, architect by trade, and leader by choice. Every episode will deliver real-world strategies, unfiltered advice, and the tools you'll need to take your leadership to the next level. Let's get started. All right, today's episode is, what does it mean to be a strategic leader? So let's start with defining strategic leader. So what does it mean? It means having long-term vision. It's about seeing all of the different pieces and having a plan for that whole system, right? Being able to see the whole system, having a plan for the whole system, thinking maybe years out and how you might attack to get to that end goal. That is all around strategy. And the knock on, I would say, being a strategic leader is sometimes they are too visionary. They are stuck in what's next, and they often lose sight of today of what needs to happen now, what execution we need to do to keep the wheels on the bus. So those are kind of what it means to be strategic, where you have to balance that with making sure you are doing the things necessary to maintain the things you need to in the organization. But you have to have that kind of long-term vision. Otherwise, the things you are working on will eventually get stale and not operate as efficiently or effectively as they once did. And so you need to always be looking at where are we going from here. That's your role as a leader. The organization, your teams are expecting that from you. And so you have to keep your eyes on that. But I would stress that you've got to maintain the balance between, again, keeping the wheels on the bus, executing on that vision or keeping that long-term vision. When I think about that, in my career, I think about putting in the technology space platform, which is a systems approach to multiple systems or applications as part of the platform. You might think of a platform being, I'll use HR because that was one of my business units as a leader. Our organization helped support that business unit. And the platform was all about hire to retire, everything in between. So on the platform, there were components of that platform that supported all of the operations for HR from hire all the way through retire. And so we had to do both in terms of making sure we kept the operations of that system running while we were looking at the long-term strategy for where we wanted to go with that platform, with those systems. Because the moment we didn't think about the strategy, make that organization stale, it would make the technology they're using stale. We would be reactive to what we needed to do next. If you're strategic, you have a plan before you get stale, before you have to react. You are now ahead of that, and you can make plans and adjust for where you want to go long term. So setting that frame for how to be a strategic leader, just some of the differences and what it means to be strategic.
I like the framing, how you said strategy pulls the whole picture together. Oftentimes, strategy is seen as the opposite of tactics. And they're not opposites. Right. They are tactics are used to achieve your strategy. They're part of the tactics are the part, strategy is the whole. And I also like how you pulled in operations as well, which is you have to keep the systems and the people and the team running today, because you can't sacrifice today for tomorrow, and you can't sacrifice tomorrow for today. That really resonates to me because I'm much more a strategic leader than I am an operational one. Everyone has their gifts. Mine are in strategy, less so in operations. Yes. Because I'm a coder by blood, architect by trade, and a leader by choice, that architect piece is what gives me my strategy. And having built an enterprise architecture practice multiple times, I can tell you the costs of losing the strategy, which is built enterprise architecture practice. We put strategies in place, and strategies require you to lead through influence, not through authority. Yes. Because as the old adage goes, culture eats strategy for breakfast. Yes. And that is so true. And you can't edict execution of a strategy. You need buy-in, which requires influence. The first time I built an enterprise architecture practice and we put those strategies in place, we had some buy-in, but we focused primarily on developing the strategy, less so on getting buy-in to the strategies that were being developed. The metaphor that was used for why they were disbanding the enterprise architecture team is that, and he said to me, and this is Steve Ambrose, he said this to me, he said, you built a capability that the organization is not ready to consume. While I was not ready to hear that. He was right. He was 100% right. I built a capability around technology strategy that the organization was not ready to consume because I focused on getting to the strategy in terms of where we should go, not as much as I should have, getting buy-in on where we should go. That is so important. So if you're intending to be a strategic leader, you have to crank up your influence and less rely on authority. And so the second time that I built the enterprise architecture practice, I took that lesson and I focused on getting buy-in. And I focused on making sure that everyone, that we were marching down that road together. And while I was responsible for the technology strategy, I couldn't be known as that is Philip's strategy. Right. Because then it's for naught. It has to be our strategy. And it took months of work to get first everyone to buy in that we needed a strategy. Because, when you have a diverse team, you have folks that are operationally minded, which you need them. You have people that are more strategic minded, and you need both. And so getting everyone to a place where, yes, we need a strategy, and then getting everyone to agree on the strategy in a way that it was our strategy. And that, inside that, was the magic. Yes. That was the time that it stuck, and the strategy continued to execute even after I left the role, which is what you want. Which is one of my objectives going into rebuilding it again, was to say, I can't let what happened the first time happen again. Yeah. I can't let building the capability only for it to be torn down because it wasn't seen as valuable. Strategy really requires that you collectively understand what the win looks like. So all parties have to buy off on the win. Yes. And it's the big win, which will be built up upon smaller wins, but it requires everyone to sign up to say, okay, Yes, we know what the win looks like. Yes, we know what it takes to get there. And yes, we've all bought in on the journey.
Yes. Yeah. That is really good because it speaks to so many things. Influence and the buy-in is critical because not everybody can see the vision. Right? Not everybody can see the whole system. So being a strategic leader, to your point, if you don't get everybody else to see and buy in to that vision, so you got to spend time getting people to envision what you vision. Right?
Yes.
Which is difficult. Some people just can't see that far ahead, right? They can't see the whole, they see parts of it and they know what they work on.
Yes.
But being a strategic leader means everybody's got to see it. I just think about a lesson that I learned from my daughter, and she was only in 3rd grade. My oldest daughter loved basketball all her life. Decided in the 3rd grade to try out for basketball. Why 3rd graders would need to try out for a basketball team? Shouldn't every 3rd grader just make the team? I don't know. But she had to try out. And she got cut. We thought she'd be devastated. And she came home and she said, I asked her how was tryouts, and she said, I got cut. And I was waiting to give her the big embrace as a dad and say, it's going to be okay, you know. And she said, it's okay. She said, I'm going to play chess instead. And I said, okay, I wasn't expecting that. You don't know how to play chess. And she was like, yeah, I know, but they're going to teach me. And I said, okay. So she began to learn how to play chess. And they were really just trying to pacify her. The teachers had love for her and knew how much she liked basketball. Also thought she would be crushed. So they were going to give her chess as an alternative. It turns out she picked up the game really fast. And while they were just giving her something to do as a 3rd grader, because most of the chess club were 4th and 5th graders, so she was actually younger than anybody in the room, she picked it up so fast that they put her on the team. That team went on to play 17th in the nation. And I learned strategy as she was learning chess. She was an aggressive chess player, so she would always be on attack, right? That was the way she approached the game. Well, she got to nationals, and they played 7 games over 3 days, and she lost her first 3 games, and she was just defeated. And there was a coach there that took interest in her from another school, but just liked her style, and he saw me and was like, how's she doing? I said, she lost her first 3 games, and I think mentally she's done. And he said, well, where is she? And he went to talk to her. And they played back her first 3 games. And he noticed that her strategy had changed from school play versus being in a national tournament. And he says, what are you doing? And she's like, I just can't win here. And he said, that's not true. Why are you playing this way? This is not the way you play. And he got her back to her strategy.
Yes.
Right? And she ended up winning the next 4 games. I just watched her, never became a good chess player. She'd always kick my butt in chess. But I thought I learned something more valuable in the game of chess. I learned to see the whole board, to see moves as they were coming and be predictive and know what I wanted to do as a result, right? And I thought, I want to teach my corporate team strategy in the way I'm seeing it now. And so I thought of an ingenious way to do that. And I brought several chessboards. And I was going to teach this team to play chess, not to learn the game of chess, but to learn strategy the way I did. And so we were in one row, and I set up the chessboards all the way down the row. And I paired people up. And I said, all right, this is going to be our way to learn strategy. And they started playing it. And I would just walk the aisles and see how they were doing. Well, I don't know, a few days went by, and this turned into a full-blown chess tournament. It was no longer about strategy. They were playing for wins and losses. They were putting up scoreboards and everything. And I was like, whoa, wait a minute. This is going all wrong. And I thought, okay, they're not getting what I want, which is the strategy piece, not to learn how to play chess.
Mm-hmm.
And so I said, okay, here's what we're doing. All the boards are going away, except for one. That one board will be in my office, and everybody's playing both sides of the board.
Nice.
Here's the key. Whenever you come in my office and you got a question, a request, you want to mention something, you just want to say hello, you got to make a move. There'll be an arrow to tell you which side made the last move, so you'll know which side you're playing when you come. And they said, but I don't know what the other person's strategy is. And I said, that means you got to see the whole board.
Mm-hmm.
You got to play the whole thing. You got to envision the whole thing. You can't just play your piece. And it's for your team.
Mm-hmm.
So now you've got to think about the person coming behind you. Not about winning and losing, but what happened before you and what's going to happen after you is the strategy I want you to develop. And so they start playing this odd game of chess. Nothing like you've ever seen. Again, it wasn't real chess, but they would come in and they would make a move. And they would say, well, who made this move? And I'd say, I don't know, but what are you going to do as a result?
Mm-hmm.
And that was my way of teaching strategy in a fun way that got them to see the whole vision of a move that happened before and after them. So I would say, vision is always looking forward, but you also have to know where you came from.
Yes.
Right? So you don't have to look back, but you got to have some sense of what happened before you so that you know where you're going. We played that for a while and they got it. And we had some laughs and fun, but we ended up tearing it down. That was my story that I learned from my oldest daughter and her learning how to play chess and going through what strategy looked like. Because one of the best games for strategy is chess.
I could not agree more. I think that's such an excellent way to do it. That's brilliant. I want to ask you a question. Were there any echoes? Like, as the team played the game and had those realizations, were there any echoes of them applying that?
Oh, in real life?
In real life.
Yes. Because, now, our audience should know a little tidbit about this whole story. And that is that team was it wasn't the architecture team, we would call the quality management group, which was made up of essentially architects. And their purpose was anything that was going in production, they wanted to make sure it was quality, right? It was fit. And so they would apply their architectural experience and background and skill set to whatever was being produced to make sure that it met those architectural standards. In order to be an architect, in order to be in that group, you needed to be strategic. And so it began to play out in that way. The reason that this is an interesting story and a small tidbit is my partner here became the leader of that group. Which then became a true architecture group. And we had that conversation. So he's laughing, he's asking these questions. When he's part of the story, he wasn't on a team. He was actually leading an entirely different group.
Yes.
And the conversation, long after the chess and trying to get strategic thinking and that sort of thing, was, of course, Mr. Coder by Blood architect. He was a better fit for that organization because of who he is, that he took his vision and our leadership's vision for where that group could really make impact and add value to the organization was part of the vision that you brought into that space. So we had started the strategy conversations. It definitely was a space that needed it from an architectural standards standpoint. But talk about vision, you brought the next level of vision to that entire group.
And I'll give you an echo. Because oftentimes, one of the things that you can struggle with in the architectural realm is the ivory tower, is where folks go off and they come up with these great white papers.
Yes.
that are fantastic, but have no real traction. That isn't what that architecture team ultimately became. They weren't in an ivory tower. They were very applied. And so some of the echoes of them understanding all of the moving parts came from what you did with that team. And it made my job significantly easier. And so while we had other struggles, one of the struggles we didn't have was folks that were part of that team really understanding how strategy works and being able to see the whole board. That wasn't one of the struggles, which was incredibly helpful to me. So that's one of those echoes where they took that with them. And in fact, people that were in that quality management group, some of them grew into some of the best leaders, some of the best strategic leaders, not necessarily people leaders. Some of them grew into the best technical strategic leaders as well. It has its roots in you taking the time and making the investment, helping them understand strategy.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for that. I have to tell my daughter thank you.
Yes, do that.
Yes, because I don't know how strategic I would have been without watching her and, go through chess. What's interesting, just to close the loop on her story, she went on to play basketball. That just made her stronger, more determined to play basketball. Never shattered her confidence. Small tidbit of basketball, still strategic, is that finishing 8th grade, she's getting ready to go to high school. We go to the open house for the clubs, go into the gym, basketball team is there. She walks right to varsity. She's a freshman. And I said, you got to start over here with the freshman table and work your way to varsity. She's like, Dad, I'm playing varsity. I said, it don't work like that. So I see the coach. I said, well, maybe he going to help me make this point. So we walk up to him, introduce ourselves. I said, Coach, question for you. How likely is it for a freshman to start varsity? He says, very unlikely, because I only play the top 7 players of 11. So if you're not in the top 7, you might as well play at your level to get the experience and not sit on the bench. I said, thank you very much. I looked at her and was like, see? She looked at me and said, well, I'm going to be one of the top 7. I said, you're not getting this, but okay. Long story short, she was the starting point guard day 1 for varsity basketball. Her strategy, I believe, from chess helped her be a point guard. Because she had point guards need vision. Right? Yes. They need to see the floor. They need to see what's coming next. They need to have the plan. They need to hear the plan from the coach, execute it, and see the vision as it's happening. She got all of that, I believe, from her love for basketball, but chess helped her see that. That knowledge and strategic thinking helped her play varsity soccer, which she had never played in her life, because the soccer coach saw the strategy that she had applied as a point guard in basketball. He needed a goalie, and goalies have to see the field.
Yes.
They have to direct the team and kind of have a plan for what they want to do. He saw her do that in basketball, asked her to join the soccer team. She joins it. That team wins the district championship, and she becomes an all-district goalie in her only year playing soccer. All strategic. Everybody saw the strategy she could imply to all of those different things: chess, basketball, and soccer. So just amazing, how she was able to do that. And again, just watching her taught me a lot.
And that's the thing about strategy. It's so cross-applicable. Just about everything. Similar. So in architecture, there's TOGAF, the Open Group Architecture Framework. And it's basically a way to develop strategy. It's fundamentally what it is, right? and there's a process called the ADM, the Architecture Development Method. It's a step-by-step way to develop a strategy. It's fundamentally what it is.
Okay.
And it's really good. And so I'm having some conversations around leadership development, and I was struggling to make that connection with an architect, because like, I want to become a leader. So I'm having these conversations with the architect. I'm like, I want to become a leader. How do I do that? And I'm explaining them, but I'm realizing I'm using leadership concepts that they haven't yet connected to. And I said, oh, okay. I know their world, although I'm leading it. I know their world. I know architecture. And so I asked the question. I said, you know the ADM? He's like, yeah. I said, what is the ADM? He's like, well, that's how we develop our technology strategy. Like, yeah. And why do you need a technology strategy? It's like, to do transformation, because it's about going from one state to the next. It's a series of transitions. Exactly, which is what a strategy gives you, is a series of transitions. Yes. And I said, so have you run an ADM on you? He said, what do you mean? I said, an architecture development method, which gives you a strategy in terms of a series of transitions. Those steps are in there. You know them. You're certified. Yes. Have you run that on your career? Have you identified the series of transitions that you would need to go through to get from your current state through your transitionals to your target? And the penny dropped for him. He went, oh. I said, yeah, it's all the same. It's how you develop a strategy doesn't fundamentally shift, right? Yes. The vocabulary will shift, right? The specific nouns and verbs will shift, but fundamentally the process is exactly the same. And he went back and he did it. And he said, oh, okay. And he was able to use his architecture training to develop a set of career transitions for himself.
That's good.
It worked for him. Yeah. That ability to cross-discipline, right? And say, oh, how do we take what we are familiar with here and apply it over there? Can make strategy much more approachable for folks that may be struggling with it, especially when leadership, which often seems different, and in a lot of ways it is, but in some ways it's just like everything else.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Well, excellent. We are at our time. Love the discussion. This was all around how to become a strategic leader. And what we discussed was strategy as a leader is all around long-term vision. It's around planning, getting others to see the vision, having influence as a leader, to bring people on board with what you're envisioning and what you see long-term. It is not the opposite of tactical, which many folks will say, strategic versus tactical. You got to have tactics. Execution is part of the vision, so they are not in opposition. Strategy is applicable in many different disciplines. So once you become strategic, you can use that skill set in many different spaces, both personal and professional.
Yes.
Continue to think in strategy, but keep the wheels on the bus as you're doing that as a leader. And with that, we will see you next time.
Thanks for tuning in to Leadership Unfiltered. We hope you have found value in our conversation and are ready to take action in your leadership journey. If you enjoyed this episode, subscribe, share, and leave us a review. And don't forget to connect with us on social media for more leadership insights and resources. Until next time, keep leading with purpose.